This video discusses the effective use of formative assessment and the importance of feedback to the student. If we are to involve students in the formative assessment process and help them learn to use feedback, we must provide them with the strategies to do this. We must share the learning objectives and the criteria for success. We must teach them how to engage in peer and self-assessment. We cannot assume that they have these skills. Skills like providing constructive criticism, using feedback, and setting goals must be taught and modeled. Finally, we must provide opportunities for students to use feedback and to improve. As educators, it is very important to consistently relate improved performance to the student use of the feedback, reinforcing that students are in control of their learning. When teachers provide appropriate feedback, it motivates the student and engages them in the learning process. To accomplish this, teachers should 1. Provide students with a clear student learning objective. It is important that learning objectives are in student-friendly language. 2. Ensure students understand what success looks like. Students must also know what the evidence of their learning will look like. For example, if you are teaching students to utilize a specific reading strategy, students should know that they will demonstrate their learning by applying the strategy on an independent reading task. 3. Use an appropriate formative assessment strategy. The assessment must be aligned to the goal. If the goal is to apply a reading strategy, then the assessment must require students to apply that strategy. If the goal is for students to understand a concept in math, then the teacher should require an open-ended response that demonstrates that understanding. 4. Provide timely feedback and appropriate follow-up instruction or intervention. It is important for feedback to occur in a timely way, before students move on and possibly become more confused. 5. Involve the student in self-assessment and reflection. Students should be encouraged to share ownership and accountability for their learning. They should be encouraged to use rubrics for peer and self-assessment that are written in student-friendly language. They should also be encouraged to find their own mistakes and apply the strategies they have been taught in order to address those mistakes. For example, if the student applies a strategy to calculate the area of a triangle, but does not answer correctly, he should first independently go through the steps of the strategy again to see if he can determine what part of the strategy he did not utilize properly. If he cannot do this independently, the teacher can provide appropriate intervention. 6. Reassess. The last step is to reassess in order to determine if students have now achieved mastery. Sometimes we skip this step. We might explain where the student went wrong and assume he then understands. However, it is important to take the time to reassess to ensure he has mastered the learning objective. Feedback from formative assessments is important. Robin Jackson, author of Never Work Harder Than Your Student, says, "Effective feedback shows where we are in relationship to the objectives and what we need to do to get there. It helps our students see the assignments and tasks we give them as opportunities to learn and grow, rather than as assaults on their self-concept. And effective feedback allows us to tap into a powerful means of not only helping students learn, but helping them get better at learning." This raises the question of, what is appropriate and effective feedback? It is essential that feedback relates specifically to the learning goals being assessed, and when appropriate, the strategies that students should have applied. Both positive and negative feedback should be specific and usable. For example, general comments like, "Good job," do not provide any specific information that the learner can utilize and apply. Good feedback is timely and constructive. This means it is related directly to the student learning objective, includes both positive feedback as well as suggestions for improvement, and focuses on the work, not the student. Specific. Specific feedback avoids general praise or negative comments. Indicate what students did right and what they could do better. Feedback must be focused on the product or behavior, not on the student. Lastly, it must be usable so the student understands how to utilize the feedback to improve performance. Students should then have the opportunity to improve their performance. In this way, formative assessment allows teachers to make instructional decisions that impact daily practice.